defensive action, but also collective responsibility. Joining us today is Rabbi Laura Bellows. She's the Director of Spiritual Activism and Education at Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate, where she works to build climate resilient, spiritually rooted, justice-seeking communities centered in Jewish wisdom. She served as a curriculum and ritual designer, outdoor experiential educator, program manager, artist, and facilitator in Jewish and interreligious spaces. Laura studied environmental studies at Oberlin and was ordained at Hebrew College. With her is our rabbinical or fourth-year rabbinical student, Joe Blumberg. He is the senior rabbinic fellow at B'nai Jeshurun on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. He previously worked as an educator at Brown RISD Hillel and spent a year as a Fulbright scholar in Jerusalem. Joe was a 2022-23 rabbinical student fellow at Dayenu, where he advised Jewish communities on their climate justice work. There's going to be time for questions at the end of this session. There'll be some interaction throughout where we're actually going to open up the chat, so please keep an eye on that. But if you have a technical question, feel free to reach out to me or Tani, and at the end, I will be taking questions for the Q&A. And we have one source that we're covering today, which we'll post the link to that, but we'll also screen share as well. And I'm so delighted that you guys could join us, and I look forward to hearing this conversation between Joe and Rabbi Laura.
Great.
Thank you so much, Ellie. And it's great to be here with all of you. And with you, Joe. It's been a little while. As Ellie shared, Joe was a rabbinic intern at Dayenu, and it's great to be back in conversation.
It is. It's really good to see you, Rabbi Laura. And nice to see everybody. I see some familiar faces and lots of new faces. So it's really a pleasure to meet you all and spend some time together. We want to start, Rabbi Laura, with the first question in the blurb that we put out to describe this session, which is, how do we move forward when the future feels uncertain and frightening? In some ways, that question is so much bigger and scarier than that phrasing. The moment in history that we're living in is so overwhelming. If you're reading the news, there's just so much happening. And climate change is an enormous issue that we are all facing, and it's one of so many enormous issues. So when we're faced with that level of enormity and potential overwhelm, I think the first question is, how do we begin to kind of tie our shoes and begin to just move forward into that question with courage and grace rooted in Judaism? Where do we start?
Great question, Joe. Certainly, we are faced with an uncertain future, and it is frightening, and it is also full of possibilities, both the good and the bad. Some of us, maybe many of us, have experienced, in the context of climate change, have experienced a sense of helplessness or hopelessness, or simply overwhelm when it comes to climate crisis. Can I just see by show of hands, like, anyone experienced that? Anyone felt helpless or hopeless before, or felt like, what could I possibly do? Well, I see it. I see a number of hands. So I know that we also probably have people in this room, because there's a growing number of people in the Jewish community and beyond who have experienced the effects of a climate disaster, who have loved ones who have, including smoke-filled skies, and that many of us experienced in New York City a couple years ago. And those are the kinds of impacts that are affecting communities disproportionately, some communities much more severely than others. Many of us are worried about the state of the world, and the world that our children or our students or our grandchildren or potential children might be inheriting. And we know that the climate crisis is not only a political and ecological and a justice issue, it's also an issue of the soul. It also raises these big existential and moral questions. At Dayenu, we've been calling that kind of soul work, that work that helps us get unstuck and move forward, we've been calling that spiritual adaptation. How do we spiritually and rooted in Jewish wisdom live in a time of climate crisis, live in a climate changing world? How do we cultivate the spiritual courage and resilience to face and process hard truths, not to turn away from them, but to be with them and to move forward together in our changing world at a scale and at a pace that actually makes a difference? We know that the climate crisis isn't going away. But we called Dayenu Dayenu, which means enough, both to say enough already, enough of inaction and delay. We need to do something now. And also, Dayenu, we have enough. We have what we need. We have the spiritual audacity. We're building the people power and the political power to take action in the narrow window that we have to avert the worst of this decree. And I'll say, in terms of what does it actually look like to get unstuck? Honestly, it looks different for each of us. Bill McKibben says that one of the best things we can do as individuals is to be less of an individual, is to join movements, join other people, remember that we're actually not alone in these feelings, nor in taking action, that we need each other. There's also some powerful teachings that we've been relying on and learning from Joanna Macy, Zichrona Livracha, who was an eco-philosopher, a Buddhist teacher, and a systems theorist. And she came up with this idea of, she calls it, it's a whole body called the work that reconnects. The work that reconnects follows basically a four-part spiral that the more time I have spent with it, the more I'm convinced that it follows some of the same steps of Yosef going down and down and down into Mitzrayim, into Egypt, and the journey of the Israelites out of Mitzrayim, out of that narrow place and into freedom. So a good arc for this moment too. So let me tell you real quick. Here are the four steps. One is grounding in gratitude, because we have to tune into what we love about this world in order to want to protect it, right? We're tuning into what's at stake and why we should care. Grounding gratitude. The second one is honoring our pain for the world, making some space to say, you know what, that woods that I grew up next to has changed a lot. This world is changing in ways that I don't even recognize anymore. And to make some space for the fear or anger, whatever emotions may be coming up, ideally in community. So that's something that we, in Dayenu's workshops, that we spend time with as well. The third stage is opening to new possibilities. What do we mean by that? And we'll spend some more time there, I think. Opening to new possibilities is about cultivating imagination for the world that we want so that we can then go forth and take action. So I spend a lot of time like thinking about, where are we at as a community or in a particular congregation or an individual who I'm speaking with, and what might it look like to take the next step on this journey. So actually, Joe, I think, can we try it out? Just like,
I
let's
think
do
we
it.
should at
We're
least
just
try
gonna,
step one, see how far we get.
great. Okay, we're gonna just take, 3 minutes or so um, for gratitude. I know that, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Zichrono Livracha, wonderful teacher who taught at JTS, taught that our goal should be to live life in radical amazement, to get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted, that everything is phenomenal, everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. Whew. So, my question for you all, and this is an invitation to share in the chat in just a moment, is to share one or more things that come to mind in response to the question, something I love about being alive on earth is. Something or some things that I love about being alive on earth is. So let's just start our time together with that grounding and gratitude. Some things I love about being alive on earth are or is. And yeah, go for it. Let's share in the chat. Beautiful flowers, fresh fruits, new blooms, which we're in Nisan now. There's a special bracha, a special blessing we get to say just in the first part of this month over flowering trees, eating blueberries, my cat, friends. Yeah, keep them coming. It could be small, it could be big. I'm very grateful for my tea. I have a little bit of a cold. Thanks for bearing with me as I drink lots of tea. Yeah, hearing music, great. Feel free to keep dropping those in. Tuning into what we love about being alive in this world, on this earth, I really do believe is one of the first steps of climate justice work. It reminds us, again, what's at stake, what we want to protect, what we care about. Yeah.
Beautiful. I would add dogs running free in Central Park. It's been an aspect of nature that I've really been appreciating these days. Rabbi
Mm,
Laura, I wonder if we can move to step three. So, step one was gratitude, step two was acknowledging our pain, and step three is moving into new possibilities. And we're gonna take a detour in a few minutes into a text that I think really opens up some pretty radical possibilities. But what's that about? Why are we moving into the work of imagination for the work of climate justice?
mm. There's a wonderful contemporary author, Rebecca Solnit, who some of you may be familiar with, Jewish author, who um, who says that one of the things that the climate crisis demands of us is of um, stories of times when people won, stories of how we win and what the world looks like when we do win. She has written and talked a lot about the power and the need for imagination, and that the climate crisis, in part, is perpetuated by a lack of imagination. We have so many narratives of our dystopic future. They're all over Hollywood. It's all over the Netflix, like the world that, we will end up in if we don't do something. And we don't have as many of the stories that are just as possible and just as real, depending on what actions we take now, of the world that we want. So flexing our imagination, and I've started to think of it as flexing as a muscle that we actually have to use, have to work. Um, Flexing our imagination is something that is not just like an activity or a fun like thing to play with. It is actually an essential part of any movement for justice. And we have to be able to tell the story of the world that we're getting to and want to go to, in order to get there. How are we supposed to get there if we can't say where we want to be going, not just where we don't want to go? And in climate, often we do have campaigns that are no campaigns, and we have yes campaigns. We have campaigns that are, stop burning fossil fuels, keep it in the ground, stop destroying the planet. And we have campaigns that are pushing for what we do want. We want, funds that are going to make fossil fuel companies support, and remediate damage that they've caused. We want people to align their money with their values. We want, many things that we want people to do in the world that we want. Um, so that's why we need to spend some time with imagination. And I'll just say, Passover is coming, obviously, very soon. No anxiety here. We're just going to move forward. And there are some really powerful narratives from the moment of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt. When at Dayenu, when we sort of sat down to think about like, okay, imagination is important. We've heard Rebecca Solnit, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, many other people making the case for the need for imagination in climate work and climate justice work in particular. So as a Jewish climate organization, what we do is say, what's the Jewish wisdom here? And what does it look like to do this work as Jews working on climate action? So one of the places, as I said, that we've turned to is the narrative of leaving Egypt, in part because it was a time of such pivotal transition, such big change, right? We crossed from one state of being as a people to a completely different one that was full of possibility as we entered the wilderness. And we actually just started a new book of Torah this week, and are heading into that reality in our holiday cycle as well. So Yetziat Mitzrayim and Passover is a narrative and a sort of mythic moment that I have been returning to often in our work for climate justice.
Amazing. And there's a lot of ways to study Yetziat Mitzrayim. There's a lot of different genres of Jewish text, and we were kind of talking over the past few weeks about what would be the best example of text to bring that kind of demonstrates the expansiveness of our tradition when we come to a moment like Yetziat Mitzrayim. And we decided to do midrash. And I'm sure a lot of folks here have studied some midrash before, maybe you're familiar with it, but maybe if you could just open up for us, Rabbi Laura, why did we choose midrash? Why is that the genre we went for? And then maybe open up the text that we're going to study.
Great show. So, um, midrash. When I was thinking about imagination, I was like, okay, Yetziat Mitzrayim. There's a lot going on there, leaving Egypt, and I thought through, sort of what are the different parts of our Jewish canon. Thankfully, we have very imaginative ancestors. Many of the texts that are there, from Talmud to Mishnah to Halakha, bring in creativity in all different kinds of ways, in conversation with lived experience. But Midrash uniquely, I would say, Midrash and Agadah, sort of some of the more narrative and creative parts of our tradition, really open up space for pretty radical imagination. Some of the Midrashim that are out there, particularly about these pivotal moments, like the Israelites crossing the sea, are ones that they're just beautiful. And I have to say, if there are people here who are also midrash nerds, we spend a lot of time with that at Dayenu. We have a midrash and imagination workshop coming up tomorrow. And right, I see Bob mentioned Arthur Waskow also spent a lot of good time with that. So midrash is one of the like textual traditions that we have been turning to as a source of rabbinic imagination. And it also, I'll say, speaks specifically to the parts in our textual tradition that are uncertain, right? It looks at where are those places that we don't quite know what's happening in the text, or there are questions that are unanswered about who said what or how quite it happened. So that is, on this level within a text. And we are in a climate crisis looking across time at an uncertain future. So midrash is one of those sources, one of those, I would say, bodies of work that deals with uncertainty by bringing imagination to it. And we are bringing midrash to the work of climate change to help us cultivate imagination for an uncertain future.
Amazing. Should we
Yeah.
study?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. So folks, we're gonna I brought a midrash to share with you today that is one of my favorites. It is from Pesachta Rav Kahana, who, there are some, I'll just say, midrash can be anything from, again, Rashi to Talmud to all different parts of the canon, have interpretive, sometimes called fan fiction on Torah, sort of explanations of what's happening in the text. This body of work, Pesachta Rav Kahana, is one of the earliest collections of midrashim. It's from the 5th or 6th century in the land of Israel, and it is, I would say, often wildly imaginative. And here's the setup. Here's what's happening. So Rabbi Yochanan, so the story goes, so this is, the authors of this midrash are talking across many generations, meaning they're thinking back to the time of Rabbi Yochanan, who was a Talmudic teacher and sage, and in his Beit Midrash, in his study hall, he's talking with his students. So Rabbi Yochanan and his students are discussing what it was like when the Israelites crossed the sea to leave Egypt. And the students ask Rabbi Yochanan, well, what was it really like? What did the sea look like? What did the walls of the sea look like? And Rabbi Yochanan says, well, of course, the walls of the sea looked like lattice work, like little windows all along, and through them you could see all into the sea. And the students are, oh, wow. And right at that moment, they hear someone at the window. Great. Ellie's going to put up the text for us. We can see that as well. And I should say I'm going off of a interpretation, a translation by Howard Schwartz, but you can also see the original here. So the students say to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan tells the students it looks like lattice work. And right at that moment, in the window of the Beit Midrash, they hear from Serach Bat Asher. There's an old woman peering in the window of the house of study. Rabbi Yochanan says, who are you? What are you doing here? And Serach Bat Asher, who, quick aside, Serach Bat Asher is an amazing mythic presence in Torah, who was born in the time of, is one of the siblings of Yosef, and sort of lives, is the daughter of Asher, is Yosef's niece, and lives from pre-Egypt times all the way through, and some say she's still around today. So she's kind of the one who carries the memory across generations. So she shows up in the window of Rabbi Yochanan's Beit Midrash and says, "It was not like that. And I know because I was there. I crossed the sea with those Israelites." And in fact, the walls of the sea were shiny. They resembled mirrors. And in the walls of that sea, in those mirrors, were reflected every human, every person who was crossing, both the ones who crossed there and the ones to come and the ones who had come before. We all crossed together. And when Sarah had finished speaking, no one dared contradict her, for her knowledge was firsthand. So you can, Ellie, you can take that down, and actually maybe Joe, I'll invite you to paste the text in the chat, also just the English, so that people can have it visible. I am curious to hear, just letting that story, that midrash sink in a little bit. I'm curious to hear from folks, again, just in the chat. What strikes you? What's surprising? What stands out to you? What are you curious about? Yeah. So we'll just take a moment to hear some reflections from the room. Again, share in the chat. So what stands out to you? What are you curious about? And as we wait for any reflections to come in, because I know it takes a little time to type also, so keep them coming. I'll just mention that there is something I think really cool about the cross-generational experience, both within the midrash, like inside the text, and in what Sarah Barasher is sharing, right? She is both reflecting in the original, it says both everyone who is crossing and everyone who had come before. And Howard Schwartz's interpretation, translation, he says everyone who is crossing, everyone who came before, and everyone who comes in the future. That there are all these generations in this moment of pivotal transition together. That Serach Barasher is actually bringing that perspective of thinking across time about the generations before and that would come. Myra says, mirrors, who could see themselves and who were they? Yes, so important to us all. There's actually other wonderful midrashim about mirrors and the women while they were still in Egypt, and how they used those mirrors essentially as resistance. Great, and Ellie is sharing some. Yes, here's to smart, mature women informing a bunch of men and boys about how it really was. Exactly. So feel free to keep the comments or curiosities coming. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting, Josh. Are there future generations, including those who would never be? In this, I think what you're asking is in the context of climate change. As I know you can't come off mute, but yeah, feel free to type a little more if you want. But in this case, I'll say one of the questions I'm sitting with about those future generations is what it means to, in the present moment, without knowing who's coming after or how their lives may be profoundly affected by our choices today. Right, climate change, Shoah, pogroms, exactly, like the many, many challenges we have faced and will face. But to actually start to think of ourselves as future ancestors, as the ones who are affecting not just the world today, but the world that will come and those future generations. We are, in this context, trusting that those future generations will come, but what we don't know is what their lives will be like. So let's see, I'm going to read a couple more comments, and then we're going to shift to essentially I want to push you all a little bit and challenge you to take a moment to also join in the imagination project. I'll talk more. So, right, David is saying the window is Rabbi Yochanan's take, but also Sarah looks through the window. Yes, I love that. Right, she's still outside the Beit Midrash, but has a voice within it. And this idea that, yes, we are all in these pivotal moments, whether it was crossing the sea or at Sinai, right? There's something about, I would say, a Jewish view of time that encourages us to think not only about the present moment, but also about those who came before us, on whose shoulders we stand and whose DNA we carry with us, and those who will come next, L'dor Vador. So let's shift. Feel free to keep other curiosities or comments coming. I have a question for you all, and I actually want to invite you to take a pen or paper on your computer and just spend, great, we're going to spend like 5 minutes of writing time working on this. This is like a little taste of Dayenu has something, a workshop called Midrash and Imagination. I said it's happening again tomorrow. But it really is a space to cultivate imagination, since, as I said, we believe it's a muscle. We have to practice describing, telling the story of the world that we want so that we can get there. So this is your invitation today as we move towards action to be a part of helping tell the story of that world. And to do that, you're going to do a little writing. I'm not going to, no one has to share. This is just like, an invitation for yourself, though there will be an opportunity to share if you want to. So I want to invite you to think of yourself as walking through the sea, as being in a time of great transition toward the future that we want, toward a just, livable, sustainable, thriving future. And just to name, it's hard. For some of us, it's really hard to imagine that. It's hard to get there because standing in the world as it is feels so far away from the world that we want. But for this moment, I am asking you to try it, to just try on the hat of imagining yourself in the year 2200, 174 years from now, in a thriving future. Imagine that you are the one who is in that future. You are that future being living in that world. And someone from today, an ancestor, so to speak, living today, is asking you, the future being, about your life. So what do you want to say to them? What do you want to share with them about the world that you're living in, the time that you're living in? What is it that you want them to know about your time that might help them in the time that they're living in 2026? So we're leaving the chat open, but this is really just an invitation to spend the next 5 minutes or so. You could write it as a dialogue, or you could just write, if you were to write a postcard from that thriving future back to someone today. What might you write in that postcard? And we're just going to take, the next 5 minutes. So enjoy a bit of creative practice and a bit of imagination.
I feel like I should throw music on for everyone to be generative too, but
I'm happy to throw music on if you want. I have some up.
I will leave it. People can reflect in quiet.
Okay. Take another minute. And I want to invite you, in the words of my colleague, Rabbi Adina Allen, she says, come to a comfortable or uncomfortable stopping place. Um, there's a lot to share from the future that we want. There's a lot I want to know from the world today about that future. But before you leave that mindset entirely, go ahead and just tune into what is one image, one essentially artifact. What is something from that world in the year 2200? Some image, some future reality that we dream of, that you want to hold on to. This one image or sight or sound or reality that you want to hold on to, like tuck in your pocket and hold on to it for the world today. So just take a moment to collect that artifact from the future. And the chat is open. We're going to send a little waterfall of those images into the chat. So so when you're ready, I'm going to invite everyone who is able to, in a short span of time, to write into the chat one image, one artifact, one sensation from that world so that we can hold on to them together. So take a moment to share that word or phrase or image in the chat. Okay, keep them coming. I want to see at least 5 more. Great. Yes, we have food. We have enough food. We have a ground level that is filled with parks and forests and lakes, and we are living in the underground. So fascinating. We have bicycles everywhere and access to food throughout our cities. We have peace. And and people are existing in harmony and cooperation. We have culturally made some really big shifts. We have breathable sky, air, and clean water without waste and smoke. There's not trash on the beach. Nobody is living near polluting factories. So keep these images, these artifacts from the future coming. And I'll just say, I know this is, it's a leap. It's a leap to take, to say, hey, in 10 minutes, we're going to, step into the future that we want. And I actually, this kind of imagination work You can go a lot deeper. You can spend a lot more time having these conversations, actually developing out, we call it climate storytelling, developing out more of the vision and the kind of the bones of what the future looks like that we're working towards. And it's often those visioning or imagination exercises that give us some of the strategic direction in our campaigns. What is it that we are working towards? Who are the players? And how do we then get there? So exactly. Thanks, Rabbi Eber. We realized that the cooperation of resources and power was key to the thriving of all. Yes, so part of this world is how we make decisions, how resources are shared. And, as someone named earlier, and also the cultural landscape that allows us to ensure that everyone has what they need. So thanks for going there. Feel free to keep sharing if you'd like. But thanks for going there. And I hope that, wherever you wrote this little postcard from the future, should you want to, I hope you hold on to it, stick it somewhere, let it be a reminder of the world that we actually are moving towards. And yeah, I think, Joe, we're ready to move on.
Okay. I would just say, going back to the midrash, my
Yeah.
hope is that in 2200 they would be able to look back as if Serach was there with them, or maybe Serach is here, and the folks in 2200 are able to say that nobody dared to contradict Serach. Maybe we are Serach in this generation, shaking our fists, hoping that someone will listen to us, acknowledge the crisis, and that fear in the work that we have to do to solve the climate crisis won't be ignored by later generations, starting with us.
Ken Son, may it be so. Yeah.
So let's spend a few minutes moving from. I love this. We went from gratitude to creativity to midrash. Let's get into some practical nuts and bolts. What can we do as Jews living in 2026 with limited time? Everybody's so busy. What can we do in the context of this changing climate world? What work is Dayenu doing that maybe we could plug ourselves into?
So first, I feel like we have to do a little bit of just like going from the 100,000 foot, like the year
Yeah.
2200, and just like, whoo, like bring it down to the, like, okay, what's the 10,000 foot? Like, what are we going to do today, tomorrow, next week, next month, in time for the midterms, like all these things. Um, and um, and as I said at the beginning, the work is big. It's often overwhelmingly big. How much needs to happen, and it is the kind of work that happens together, right? Like any one of us can do incredible action on our own, but even if every single Jew in this country or in the world did our own individual action, um, sorry to say, it's not going to be enough to change the needle on climate. We actually need to join together. And we need to scale our action and bring a bold and audacious voice to this challenge that affects many other issues of our time and generations to come. So we are, this last step, I said gratitude, like honoring our pain for the world, imagination, and moving to action. So what does it look like to get to the world that we want? At Dayenu, we often talk about this as being a matter of building people power, political power, and spiritual power. So building people power, we have Dayenu has Dayenu circles all over the country. So they're like hubs that you can join, whether through Dayenu or there's also other great organizations that are doing excellent work on the ground to build people power, to organize ourselves around climate. There's 350, there's Third Act, there's Adama, there's like many other organizations. And Dayenu is organizing American Jews to mobilize around climate justice and really at scale, and doing that on a systems level. Building political action, building political power as a nonpartisan organization means we're helping make sure that people who care about climate get out to the polls and vote and have access to free and fair elections. We're making sure that people in New York and California and Massachusetts right now, those are three key states of ours. Do we have anyone here from New York, California, or Massachusetts? I see some people. Great, great. Nancy, hi. And some other people too. So people in those key states, we have some specific legislation, again, nonpartisan legislation that you can work on and get involved with. And we do that by also, both in those states and also nationally. And we also are working to build spiritual power. Like I shared at the beginning, our spiritual adaptation work, which I lead, is really focused on how we bring spiritual audacity, Jewish wisdom, music, and art to the work that we're doing so that we don't burn out. Because it's hard. It's hard work. Like it is a big challenge, climate change and the many other intersecting crises of our time. And working on as Jews on climate work means we get to bring some extra, I would say chutzpah, some extra spirit to the work that we're doing, both in collaboration with other faith communities, and also like uniquely as Jews at the table. So I'll say right now, there are actually some very specific things that we can do on the national level that good news, one of the effective things you can do right now is spend even 10 minutes, 5 minutes signing two things that are directed towards our representatives and senators. One of them is opposing the SPEED Act. So the SPEED Act is legislation that would gut public input and rig the permitting process in favor of costly, dirty energy projects over affordable clean energy. So we are at Dayenu, again, I was imagining a world in which there is affordable clean energy. There's balcony solar power. We're making use of the sun and the wind. We're making use of geothermal and other sources of renewable clean energy. And the SPEED Act would severely weaken the processes that ensure that the public has a right to learn about a project's risk and even to be able to voice their opposition or propose alternatives. So you can learn more and send a message to the Senate, to your senator, to vote no on the SPEED Act. Again, this is nonpartisan. It's not in favor of any one political party. It's in favor of affordable, clean energy for the future. So that link is in the chat. Thank you, Joe. And another thing that we've been focused on is the extent to which we can't work on climate without a democracy. And we are existing in a current, Dayenu's work is happening now in a political landscape that has made climate action quite challenging, except on more local and state levels, and still there, it's challenging. But on the federal level, we are also working to oppose the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act is legislation that would make it much harder, if not impossible, for millions of eligible Americans to vote. This is a key piece of legislation that we are opposing in order to ensure that everyone in this country who wants to and obviously is legally able to can vote. So that is in the chat as well. Both of those are easy sign-ons if you want to join that. And I'll say if you're looking for more ways to boost your spirit and learn climate Torah, again, the next Midrash and Imagination creative writing workshop is happening tomorrow. We also have a meetup for musicians and artists. And big picture, I'll just say that I really believe that, with all of the people in this room, 50 people in this room, and many more to whom with whom we're connected in our congregations and beyond, there is a lot of creativity. There are a lot of people who have a lot of experience with life in this world and what it means to make change, how you talk to your neighbor, how you talk to your rabbi or your community member, maybe you're the rabbi, about what we need to do to align our values with our actions in the world. So that work of spiritual adaptation is not just about making space for the emotional and the spiritual within this work and helping, sustain ourselves. It's also about thinking about what does it look like as Jews uniquely to say, hey, we were told in the first chapters of the Torah to be Shomrei Adamah, to be caretakers of the earth. We are at a pivotal time, a pivotal moment where we have an opportunity to take action that future generations will not. And just like the Israelites got to the point when there could be no more slavery in Egypt, and we had to get out of there, and it was time to cross the sea. And there were miracles, Baruch Hashem, there are miracles, literally, thank God for those miracles. And there is nachshon, and there are moments when we actually had agency to cross the sea, to make that difference, help um, to help cross the sea. I'll share one last little midrash, which is that um, there's a beautiful teaching that when Miriam and the women danced on the far shore of the sea, they raised up their timbrels and they had their dance moves and all of that. And the midrash asks, but wait a second, where did the timbrels come from? Where did these instruments come from? How did they know the dances? And the answer that he gives is that back in Mitzrayim, when they were still enslaved, they were practicing their dance moves and they were packing their tambourines. And one of the questions I sometimes ask people is, what is it that we are packing today? What is it that we are doing right now to plan for when we will get to the world that we want? What are the things that we are planning right now? The dance moves, the songs for the streets, the I don't know, the prayers. I think, Joe, maybe you're a part of a shachrit, of a morning service that happened outside of one of these banks that was supporting the fossil fuel industry. And we are bringing spirit and Jewish wisdom to the work right now, even as we are, neck deep in the realities and challenges of the world that we have. So with that, yeah, I think I'm gonna pause there. Um, I'll share one more thing in the chat, which is if you are someone who also, like me, really loves music, you can always check out it's dayenu.org/action. And that's where you can find lots of different opportunities, including a link to Dayenu's songbook, which has 64 different songs for the streets, for healing, for comfort, and more things you can do. So we are, as Nigel mentioned way back in February, right? Tu B'Shvat kind of awakens this arc, this narrative, and we are moving towards Shavuot, and Pesach is a key stop along the way. I would even say, as Ellie proposed at the beginning, Pesach is a moment of really pausing to say, what is our role in this pivotal time? Thank you all.
I'm going to pull myself in. I have to add a spotlight, which always takes. Hello, I'm here. Thank you both so much for, this kind of lovely moment to think through. I think so much of preparation for Passover is this kind of reactive, oh, we've got to clean this, we've got to clear this. And I think it's a really amazing exercise to spend the time to not think about what we're doing in 10 minutes because we need a kitchen clean, but to think about this as a time to reframe our bigger sense of self in the world. And that it gives us an opportunity every year to think through that. And one of our participants is pointing out, as she pointed out to everyone, that the irony is we've seen this series, most of the religions teach that we need to care for the earth. Like this is not just a Jewish thing, because if it were just a Jewish thing, we're just 13 million people in the world. There's, so many, but so many different traditions also have this embedded. So I think one of my questions for you, Rabbi Laura, and actually Joe, in your work as a Dayenu fellow and also in the work you're doing through JTS in general, what are the ways in which you found partnership and fellowship, and how is that sustaining your work, and how is that kind of pushing kind of a broader agenda?
All right, Joe, do you want to talk first? I feel like I've gotten to talk a lot.
Sure.
Great.
I'll just say that I do not identify myself as a natural climate organizer. I did not grow up as a political person. When I started rabbinical school, I never thought that organizing in any sort would be a part of my life. And then I found my way to Dayenu, which has this incredible fellowship for rabbinical students. And Dayenu's offices are across the street from JTS. And the leader of Dayenu, Rabbi Jenny Rosen, grew up in the same town that I grew up in. So I felt all these like connections. And then I found myself all of a sudden, standing outside of big banks and protesting through songs and shachrit. And so I found a lot of personal chizuk and kind of spiritual expansion in plugging into Jewish climate organizing that already existed. And so there's a whole ecosystem. I'm sure many folks are familiar with the work of Jewish climate organizing in this country. And there's a lot of work to do. So for me, kind of finding my way into the environment that already existed. I've also been doing a lot of interfaith climate work over the past couple of years. We have an annual Tu B'Shvat Seder at JTS with students from across the street at Union Theological Seminary. And that is kind of a burst of energy every year to remember that, there's people all over the city of all sorts of different faiths who are thinking, who are scared, who are trying to figure out what their role is. For us as busy clergy students, it's always nice to meet other busy clergy students from other faiths who are trying to step in. And then we come together and we realize, it's obvious, but we're so much more powerful and effective and also just happier and more full of optimism and possibility when we're together. So that would be my answer.
I love that, Joe. I love getting to hear a little bit about what you're up to now in different ways. The thing that I often turn to when I think about what it means to be Jews in this work in collaboration with many other people of faith who whose traditions also tell them to care for the earth and to care for communities and the health of our communities today. So I think about that this work is really so much bigger than just our community. I think sometimes it can be easy to think that that the Jewish community, that we need to only work with Jews. Dayenu does a lot of partnerships with Green Faith, with BTS Center, with many other faith coalitions and climate and justice faith organizations that I am inspired by daily. Some of them, I will say, some of the organizations we've gotten to partner with, the Quakers, the UCCs, the evangelicals, we don't always agree eye to eye on plenty of things. But that is part of what it means to be in coalition. Dayenu is often bringing the Jewish voice to climate coalitions, to secular climate coalition spaces or faith climate coalition spaces. I know here in Massachusetts, where I'm based, we have a great secular climate coalition called Mass Power Forward. Dayenu just joined. We're the first Jewish organization to be a part of that and the only one right now. And we are organizing Jews in Massachusetts to be a part of some of the important climate initiatives in this state where there really is some room to make a difference. That's the kind of thing that, sometimes we need to be the ones to say, oh, hey, that event is on Shabbat or on Rosh Hashanah or whatever it may be. And it's important that we're there and can have those conversations. And as I said, it's not always easy. It's not always easy to partner across differences. But ultimately, we are all called towards a world and a future that we want to pass on to our children and for generations to come. And that is something that brings us together around bold action.
And I think this is one of the challenges in this moment is that sometimes progressive spaces are not feeling particularly welcoming to Jewish perspectives. And so have you found, but as all of our speakers have said, if there's anything in this universe of climate work and environmental justice, that this is something that affects, it doesn't just affect one religion, it literally affects everyone in all, unless we're all getting bunkers somewhere where there's no way that we're not going to be impacted in some way or another by climate change, whether it's in 10 days or in 10 years, that the impact is everywhere. How have you been navigating those kinds of questions around progressive spaces and discomfort with Judaism? Or not, that's not the right, but you get what I'm trying to get at without without stating exactly what I'm
Yeah.
getting at.
Um, it certainly has come up in our coalition work. I think what I was saying a moment ago, um, it just is very true, particularly since October 7th. It has gotten more difficult in different ways to be in spaces, um, in multi-faith and multi-organization, like Beyond the Jewish World coalitions. And I would say even more important, because those coalition spaces are not intended to be spaces where we are always comfortable. They're actually intended to be spaces where we get to come together across differences toward a shared goal. So that may be, you know, as I said, like building out a fund in the state of California so that fossil fuel industries in California can we can hold them responsible and accountable for remediating the damage that they've done in that state, particularly in communities that have been most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, right? That is something that many workers organizations and, I say frontline, but, organizations that are representing a lot of people who are, living in poorer communities that are more at risk for, environmental injustices. Like these are the kinds of coalitions that we want to be a part of. And as Jews, we get to bring our values and our full selves to the table also. Coalition space is not the only space that we need. We also need spaces of home. So that's often, in this time when sometimes it can be especially hard to be in spaces where we don't always agree with people. It both means that in the coalition spaces, at times we need to have difficult discussions with our partners there, that are not coming out of the blue, but are actually coming because we have relationships there. We're not just showing up and saying, stop, we can't, but we're saying, hey, look, um, we um we need to have a conversation because we can't currently sign on to this platform that you're proposing, or we need to talk about it before we do, because here are some of our lines as a Jewish community, and we're representing a big tent of Jewish community in this country. And so we need to be in relationship with those people so we can have those conversations and also have places where we get to come back. We've been hosting gatherings for song and solidarity with Jewish musicians across the country over the last few years since November of 2024, and it has been really inspiring to see hundreds of people come together for music and for song. And that's a place of homecoming, of spiritual nourishment, of inspiration that helps recharge us to keep showing up in spaces where it's not always easy, but where together we are pushing towards a shared goal that we can't do as a Jewish people alone. We actually need to work with our friends and our partners at other organizations. Does that answer it? Kind of.
I think it does. I think, and Joe, I don't know if you have anything to add.
The only thing I would add is when I think about coalition work, I sometimes think about the famous phrase from Rabbi Hillel, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? It feels like it kind of gets all the dynamics because Rabbi Laura, what you were saying about we need home. We need a place where we can feel, fully Jewish in every respect, not hiding any aspect of who we are and how we see the world. And we need to be able to step outside of that. And all of this is existential. And if we can find some way to hold all three of those in a holy balance without overweighing one or the other, which I think just generally is probably pretty good spiritual wisdom, we might be able to find ourselves in coalitions that we're uncomfortable with in some ways, and also recognize that that's not, entirely setting aside the fullness of who we are.
Yeah. I do want to say that there are moments when we don't partner on things.
Yeah.
There are moments when, yeah, there have been many moments when we have said, here's our lane and here's what we do and here's what we can say yes to, and let's stay in relationship and stay in touch, and maybe there'll be other opportunities to connect around. Yeah.
I want to end with a little bit of a pivot, but not much. I just, this is a preparation for Passover. I feel like you've given us a lot of things to think about, but I want to know, what are you guys bringing to your Seder this year? And yes, it can be in the realm of climate change, but if it's some other kind of universe of thinking that you're like, this is what I'm really excited to do at my Seder, I just, I'm, it's that time of year and I want to know.
Joe, will you share first?
Sure.
Great.
I'm just starting to get my act together for Seder. It still feels like
No, it's
it's
early.
a
It's early.
long
I'm
time away.
sorry.
No, I mean, I think one of the things I'm thinking about, it's not exactly to do with climate, but obviously it connects, is finding some way to kind of embody a release from anxiety. I think we all need to
Mm,
kind of have an exodus from the anxiety that we are carrying around in our bodies. And if we were able to do that for one night of Seder night or 8 days, I think it'd be hard to sustain for 8 days. But it connects to the work of imagination. It's like we need to find a way to fully rest and fully remember what it feels like to not feel totally wound up by all of the insanity of the world that we're living in. It's a lot easier said than done, but I'm leading our family Seder this year. I mean, that's one of the themes that I'm going to lean into. How can we actually just breathe much more deeply than we have breathed in the last, many years?
I mean, yeah, I also am leading our family Seder, and I've been thinking a lot about those same themes. And I will say it is there's nothing like working at a Jewish climate organization to get you thinking about Passover and some of the themes of Passover. I should say a Jewish climate organization named Dayenu, to get you thinking about the themes of Passover many months in advance. So I have been working with two wonderful rabbinic interns this year to put together a Dayenu Seder supplement. I just dropped the link in the chat. Thanks for that lead up, Ellie. And that Seder supplement has all different fun additions that you can bring into your Seder to spark more conversation and connection. It's not like here are climate action steps. It's really more my hope in pulling this together was to have some fun, was to give people an opportunity for rich discussion. And it has a new like climate version of Dayenu that you could bring in there and climate plagues, all that. Um, but I'll say in my particular family Seder, we will be doing a few things from here, including I like the tradition around karpas and being able to talk about what it means to hold both joy and sorrows together at the same time. So there's something about the tears. We could talk about it at maror and charoset, holding those two together as well. That bitterness never exists alone by itself. We never eat it just by itself. Maror, we eat it with the charoset, with the sweetness, the sweet mixture. And together, like we live in this world where we are constantly holding some of the hard realities, some of the sorrows, um, and also the very real possibilities that the future, by being unknown and uncertain, means it is not yet written. We do not have some guarantee that the future is going to be some horrible thing. Um, we actually have agency and have a say as to what happens in that world. So I hope to leave Seder feeling a little more rested, a little more empowered, a little more connected with the people at my table.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for this. It was such a delight to get to be part of this conversation. And I so appreciate how you brought in our community into the conversation. It's been lovely to see your responses throughout. We're going to take a little spring break, as it were, and we'll come back on May the 4th. And actually, our first session of our next series features Rabbi Harris talking about baseball, because what's more American than baseball, and what could be more Jewish than baseball? So we'll get a little bit of that coming back next month or the month after that. Have a wonderful holiday. Thank you all so much. And I'll be sharing these links in I'll put the links into the source sheet so you can have both the links and the sources together. So thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you.
Rabbi Laura. Thanks, Joe. And everyone, have a lovely Passover. Good luck with all the cleaning.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ellie.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. And thank you, Ellie.